without further ado, we're kind of closing in on some time here. Um, we want to present to you our next speaker. It's Professor Burris, the one and only. She's an award-winning designer, writer, and educator whose goal is to inspire you to get creative today. Akram is a Unity certified associate for 15 years of experience teaching game development and design, along with computer graphics, animation, and that also includes web development and higher education. Her current field of study is in the development of games for emerging technologies such as AR and VR. Currently, she holds the title of instructor of computer simulation and gaming at the University of Tulsa. And she is also the coordinator of the very own CSGC of what we are holding right now today.
That's right.
So please give us a warm welcome for Professor Burris.
This talk, I'm going to give a real quick demo of 3D Studio Max. So 3D Studio Max is an Autodesk software. Some of you may be familiar with Blender or Maya. 3D Studio Max is the same type of software. In fact, it is under the same company as Maya. Autodesk makes both Maya and 3D Studio Max. And what's really cool about Autodesk software is that it is free for students as long as they have an EDU account. And it's the industry standard for 3D modeling. And there's some discrepancies between Maya and Max. There's definitely those who really enjoy using Maya versus 3D Studio Max. But for the most part, they can do a lot of the same things. And like I said, I'm going to just do a quick demo here and give you an overview of how to set up and get started with 3D Studio Max. So let me move into that. I'm going to share with you how to get started with 3D Studio Max, creating your project folder and saving your files. So the first thing you'll see when you load up Max is the interface here. And I'm going to go through all of the tools a little bit more in depth, but just a quick overview. Up at the top here, you have your text menu. You also have some options to sign into your Autodesk account if you want to. And the workspace settings are also up here at the top. Underneath the text menu is your main menu. It has several of the tools that you'll be using throughout your work in 3ds Max. The Scene Explorer is over here, and this is where you can see all the objects in your scene and filter which ones you're looking at. You also have the command panel over on the right side of the screen where you have multiple tabs. You have your main Create tab, a Modify tab, Hierarchy tab, Motion tab, Display tab, and Utilities tab. And for the most part, you'll be working in the Create and the Modify tab. Down at the very bottom of the screen is your time and navigation tools. The bulk of 3ds Max are in these windows here. This is what is known as your viewport. And once we have a scene in here, it's going to make a lot more sense at what we're looking at. Before we get started, let's talk a little bit about the creation of Max files. Now, Max, like most 3D softwares, is not creating a single file. Instead, it works on a folder system. Inside that folder, you would have multiple assets that are applied to the project. For example, you might have images that you're referencing for materials for the object and so forth. So what you want to do before you start any 3ds Max project is to either have a Max project folder already created or to set one up. So we're going to just do a quick example here, and I'm going to minimize 3ds Max. And here you can see I am on my desktop, and I'm just going to right click on the desktop right now and create a new folder. This new folder, we're going to call it Woody's Roundup Scene 2 as an example. So there's our folder. That's the folder that we're going to use to create our new Max project. Once you have your folder, we're going to go back to 3ds Max and we're going to create a default project. So I'm going to go up to File and under the project menu item, I'm going to do create default. The Windows Explorer window is going to come up and ask you what folder do you want to create your project in. So we are going to select the Woody's Roundup Scene 2 folder. We're going to hit select, and it has created the folder. It has also set the folder. So I'm actually going to minimize Max one more time, go back into my Woody's Roundup Scene 2 on my desktop. I'm going to double click on it, and what you will see is all the folders and files that Max has auto-generated. It creates this folder directory so that you can organize everything. All your scenes will automatically be saved in the scenes folder. All your exports will be exported to the export folder. You've got render outputs, you've got materials. It's created all of that for you. Another item it's created is the MXP file. This is a file that tells Max that this is a Max project folder. If you create a folder and this is not included in it, then Max won't recognize the file structure. So this has to be in it. And again, this is the entire project folder. So that is setting up your project, and if I were to create something in the scene and I go to save it, if I go file, save as, notice that right here it says scenes folder. You'll also see that in the history the scenes folder is in that Woody's Roundup folder. So it recognizes the project folder that we just created. Now let's say that you already had a project that you want to open up and load. In that scenario, you've got to set the project folder. So before we created a project folder, now you need to set the project folder. We're going to go up to File, we're going to go to Project, and we're going to set the active project folder. Here I have navigated to my exercise files, and the project that I want to open is the Jiggly Jello project folder. So all I have to do is select that main folder, hit select, and now the project folder is set. So if I go up to File and Open, it automatically opens the Scenes folder from the project folder that I set. And in this case, I want to open up the Jello Max file. So I'm going to do Open. Now, in some cases, if you're working with an older project, you may run into a mismatch setting. This just means the gamma settings of the monitors were at a different rate. You can adopt the settings of the file or keep the system settings. I'm just going to keep the system settings, press OK. And here is the Jello scene that I have opened up. Now, you can open up a Max file simply by double-clicking it in the Windows Explorer, but what that does is it does not associate the project folder with the Max file. So if you have any external references like materials and stuff, they may not be linked. But more importantly, when you go to do a file save as or a file save, it won't know what folders to save everything in. So you always want to start by loading Max first, setting or creating your project folder, and then opening or creating your new scene. Speaking about saving your project, if you go up to File, you have three save options. You have Save, Save As, and Save Copy. So when you first get started, obviously you're going to want to do a Save As to save your scene. But it is best practice to save your project often and incrementally. As you're working with your 3D model, you're going to be making a lot of modifications, and sometimes you get to a point where you've distorted the model so badly that you can't get back to a previous undo. So in that scenario, especially since 3D modeling takes so much time, you're going to want to be able to go back to a previous version of the file. So this project that we just opened up has already been saved, but let's say I made some changes and now I want to save it a second time. I don't want to save over the current version. Instead, what I'm going to do is save copy as. And you'll notice that down here in the file name, it opens up the file save as dialog, and it takes the scene name that we've already created and simply puts a 01 after it. So it's going to be saving this incrementally. And I can do a save, and now I have a new version of that file. Again, you're going to want to do this after every so many edits, simply so that you can get back to a previous version. And I will also say, the larger your scenes get, the more likely that at some point the software may unintentionally crash on you. So again, save often and save incrementally. Now let's say that we need to start a new project. So I've been working on this Jello scene here, and as you can see, I've kind of changed out the layout. So I've got a 3 viewport layout, and I want to create a new scene. If I've made changes to my file and I need to save the scene, I would do so at this point. Then I would go up to File, and I have the option to do New or Reset. And I'm going to kind of go through the differences between the two. If I do New, and I can do New All or New from Template, if I do New All, it's going to ask me if I want to save the changes from the current scene. I'm not going to save this particular scene, so I'm going to do No. And here you can see that it cleared all the objects from the scene, but I still have the same workspace and layout, and I'm still at the same zoom factor as I was with the last scene I had opened. Now we're going to kind of backtrack and show you the difference of using the reset instead of new. So like I said, when you do new, it clears everything out, creates a new scene, but it is the same zoom and layout as this previous scene that you had open. But if I do File and Reset, again, it's going to ask me if I need to save my current changes. I'm not going to save this one. And I do yes, I really want to reset. Not only does it clear the scene, it actually resets everything back to the default max settings. So once again, I'm looking at my 4 viewport layout, and I'm all zoomed into the correct zoom for each viewport. It really is up to you which way you want to create a new document. I prefer always resetting the scene whenever I go to make a new scene. But if you've got a layout that you like and you want to kind of keep that setting, you can always do File and New. So that's just a quick way to get a new scene up and running after you've been working on a previous scene. Now that we have a scene open inside of Max, we're going to really quickly go over how to navigate that scene. When you first load Max, you are presented with 4 viewports, as they are called. There are 3 orthographic views and 1 perspective view. Orthographic views are simply views that align the object with a specific viewing plane. So in this case, I am looking directly at the top of the scene. Over in this window, I'm looking at the front of the scene. This window, the left of the scene. The perspective window, on the other hand, is a mode where your objects appear a little bit more realistic because we're looking at it on different planes at the same time. Now, to navigate in any one of these viewports, you simply click on the viewport and you'll see that the viewport turns yellow, indicating that that is the active viewport. I can use my mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Then I can click and hold down the mouse wheel to pan around the scene as well. So that is how you navigate within the individual viewports. And you'll notice that each viewport is independent of each other, so I can have them all at different angles and different views. If I ever need to change a viewport, say for example in this top viewport, I'd rather see the front viewport, I can hit the keyboard shortcuts. So F for front, L for left, T for top, B for bottom, P for perspective, and then U for orthographic. So if I'm in some sort of weird perspective, I can hit U and it will find me the best orthographic view from that point. Again, I can go back to my default orthographic view, such as the top view here. Another way to navigate the viewport is the viewing cube right here. So right now I'm looking at the top view, but if I click on one of the views, I can go to the right side of it, the back, the left, the front, or the bottom. Also rotate my scene by using the little navigation around the viewing cube. As I mentioned earlier, you can navigate the windows with the mouse wheel, but there are other ways to navigate inside your viewports, and that is with the navigation tools down at the bottom. So I have the zoom tool. If with the zoom tool selected, you can press the left button to zoom in and out of your scene. You can also use the pan tool, holding down the mouse button with the pan tool. Another tool that I really like to use is the orbit tool. This also allows you to rotate and change your point of view simply by holding down the mouse button, much the same way that you can use the viewing cube. So again, a couple of different options here. I'm going to press T again to go back to my orthographic view. Another option you have down here at the bottom is to expand your viewport. So say that I'm working on something in this top view and I want a closer view of it, but I only have this small viewport window to work with. So in the navigation window, I can use the maximize all to maximize that window. I can press it again to return. While each of the viewports can be controlled independently, there may be times where you want them all to be controlled at once. So with the zoom tools, you do have zoom all option, and you'll notice the zoom icon now has a little viewport beside it. So if I click and hold down, I'm actually zooming in and out of all viewports at the same time from wherever they were last set up. And again, I may get into some weird view unintentionally from this point, but at least it allows me to do this really quickly and control all of them. If you do find that you have really changed your views and you can't see your scene correctly, one of the best things to do the zoom extent selected or the zoom extents all. Zoom extent selected will zoom in on whatever object you have selected. So let's just say that in this window I have selected the cube and I do zoom extents, and now I have zoom extents on that object. And again, it's only doing the active viewport. However, if I come over to zoom extents all, this will zoom extents on the object that you have selected in all 4 of the windows. If I unselect everything and I do zoom extents all, it will zoom out to show every single thing in your scene. And once you're in one of the navigation tools, you simply can double click on the right mouse button and that will take you out of the tool. So now you're back to your main selection tool and you can pan and zoom using the mouse wheel. The last thing that we want to talk about in regards to the viewport is how to change the viewport layout. Right now we are looking at a 4 viewport layout, but if I go down to the bottom off to the side of the Scene Explorer, I have the Viewport Layouts tab, which I can change how my viewports are set up. So I can do a 3 viewport layout. I can do a little bit different setup where I have a larger window and smaller windows, or I can switch back to the default layout. It's just up to you how you want to set up your viewports. You also can manually resize and relocate your viewports using the arrows in between the viewport. Again, if I want to reset this, I can click back on a different layout and then go back and reset the viewport settings. In the scene we're currently working with, there are 2 cameras, and we'll talk about camera creation in a later tutorial, but right now I'm just talking about how to navigate 3ds Max. When you're working with camera, you can actually view what the camera is looking at. So in lieu of the perspective viewport here, where it's just some arbitrary point of view, we want to see what our camera is seeing. If I press C on the keyboard, this will populate our camera selection tool. And so I can choose between the two cameras. I'm actually going to choose the still camera for this example. Press OK. And this is the point of view of the still camera. When you're working with a camera viewport, you'll notice that the navigation tools change, and these now are the navigations for the camera themselves. So instead of just say zooming in and out, I have a depth of field. So it changes basically like a camera zoom. It's not changing the position of the camera from where it's located distance-wise from the object. It's just changing the depth of field, like a zoom lens on a camera. I can use the dolly tool to move the camera in and out, further in and out away from the objects. The depth of field is more like a zoom in and zoom out lens, and the dolly is physically moving the camera. There's a couple of other tools here. There's even rotate, where I can change the angle of what my camera is looking at. Now, like I said, this scene has two cameras, so I'm going to click on my camera select. I'm going to change to the moving camera this time. And so here I have the moving camera, and you'll notice that this camera is animated. So down at the very bottom of our interface, we have the animation timeline, and we have the animation controls. So if I hit the play button, this will animate the camera. Our object is also animated, and so it's doing its own thing while the camera spins around it. But you will see that we have our timeline, we have a couple of frames, and all our little animation controls here. We'll go much further in detail in animation and how to set up animations later on. But for right now, that's just how you navigate the timeline and hit the play button in the animation controls. The Scene Explorer off to the left side of the screen lists all the objects that are in your scene. So in this scene, for example, I have a Jello box, I have a floor, and notice as I click on them in the Scene Explorer, they get highlighted inside of my viewport. So the Jello box is currently selected. If you are working on a large-scale project, you may have a ton of objects in your scene. To make things easier, you can filter out what you're looking at. So for example, maybe I don't want to see any of the lights in my scene because I'm not working on lighting. I can click on the light bulb icon, and that turns off all the lights from my Scene Explorer. So that does not mean that I can't select them from the viewport, because the lights are indeed still in the scene and I can select them from here. They're just not showing up inside my Scene Explorer window. If I turn the lights back on, they come back on. Another way to quickly select items from your Scene Explorer is to type their name in the search box. So maybe I want to look up for the Jello box. So that is right there. And this is another reason why it's a great idea to name your objects as you create them, because you can quickly search for them. When you create new objects into your scene, they're just simply labeled the object name and an incremental number. So if I was creating a light, it'd be Spotlight 01 or Camera 02 or whatever the case may be. You can always right click on the object inside of the Scene Explorer and rename it from here. So I have a new scene right here opened up in 3ds Max, and I've already set my project folder and everything, so my project is ready to go. I'm going to go over to the command panel over here, and on the Create tab, I have all the built-in objects to create in my scene. So I'll start with the box here just to give you an idea, and I need to choose which viewport to create in. Typically you don't want to create your objects in the perspective window because it's hard to tell if the object is actually on the plane as you create them. Instead, you typically want to start in one of the orthographic views. And I'll go ahead and do this in the top view here. So for the box, I'm just going to click on the left button to activate it, and I'm dragging out the rectangle. Once I got the rectangular shape that I want, I click go of the left button, and then I can start to move my mouse up, creating the height of my box. So now you can see that I have my box in here. And if I click on the item, you'll see that it's got a little sort of heel outline around it. I'm going to go to the Modify tab. And under the Modify tab, it gives me the properties for this box. So at the very beginning, I want to give my box a name because all shapes are just incrementally labeled. So I'm just going to call this one My Box. When creating your objects, the color is whatever the last color setting was. So with my box selected, I'm going to click on the little color icon beside it. And this opens up the object color dialog. Typically, you're going to be creating materials to put on these objects. The colors are just there sort of as placeholders and to make it easy to differentiate different objects in your scene. So I'm going to go with, say, like this lavender color here. And I now have this box. You'll also notice that with the box selected, I have the parameter settings. So I have my length, height, and width. And I'm going to go ahead and let's say I want to do a length of 10, a width of 10, and a height of 10. And I got my length as 110. Let's change that back to 10. There we go. Now I have made this and my units are actually set up in meters currently. So it's a huge box. So I need to zoom out. And I can do that in individual viewports, but it's probably best if I just do zoom extent selected and zoom extent selected all so that it zooms up in all of the views. I'm going to use my zoom all here so that I can kind of zoom out of my scene a little bit. Going back to my create tab, and you'll notice I have several different objects that I can work with. I can also create spheres. I can create a cone simply by clicking and dragging out the diameter of the cone, the height of the cone, and then moving left or right to create the tip of the cone. There's lots of different ones in here, and whenever you have it selected, you can go back to the Modify tab and change the settings. Again, the colors are kind of randomized, and you can change those colors as needed. I do encourage you to experiment with these objects, play around with them, see what they do, see how you create them. Again, it's a click and drag and typically move left or right to create height and depth. You'll also notice when viewing your objects in the scene, we are looking at the scene in different display modes. Our perspective scene is always using a default shading, so it's creating a solid object, while our orthographic views are typically set to a wireframe, so we can see through the objects and get a sense of where they are in their size and scale and shape. If I were to click where it says wireframe here and I right click, I can actually change those settings. So I can say for the front view here, I want this shaded as well. Now again, this doesn't really do a whole lot when you're manipulating the objects as far as shape. You want to be able to see all those points on the object. So I'm going to change this back to the wireframe mode. In the perspective window, again, typically it's set to default shading so you can get more of a sense of how the framing of the scene looks versus manipulating the individual objects. However, if I click on the default shading here, I can also do edge face, which allows me to have a shaded object, but also see a wireframe outline over the shadedness of the object. And this is another way to make it easier to see all the points of the object that can be manipulated. I'm going to go ahead and turn off edge facing so that we just have shaded back inside of this view. Along with creating objects, you can also modify those objects. So if I click on my cone here, for instance, I go to the modify tab, you can see that there is a modify list, and there are a ton of different modifiers, and we'll be going through and looking at a whole bunch of these. But right now, again, I encourage you to just experiment and see what they do. For example, let's say I want to add a bend to this. So I can change the angle of the bend. There we go. Look at that. I'm bending this little cone, and so it's pointing different directions. I can also change the axis on which that bend is on. I kind of like the Z axis. So you can quickly add a modifier, and you'll notice that in your modify list up here, it's actually almost stacking the modifiers. So at any point in time, I can turn off the bend and see what the cone looks like without the bend on, and then I can turn the bend back on. If I need to modify the root object, I can go back to the cone and change it. And that is the gist of creating a few basic shapes inside of 3D Studio Max and adding a few modifiers. Again, the best way to learn how to use 3D Studio Max is to simply start playing around with it and seeing what you can do. All right. So I hope you enjoyed that little tutorial, getting started with 3ds Max, just a quick overview. Again, if you're familiar with any other 3D softwares like Blender or Maya, getting started with 3ds Max is super easy. And like I said earlier, Autodesk software, so 3D Studio Max and Maya, is available for students through their student education community. So as long as you have an EDU email address, you are able to download and utilize that software. So I've got the floor open. I know this was kind of an impromptu presentation as we had to make up some time. But if you do have any questions, I'll give you all a few moments to go in there and ask those questions. Let me Are there any 3D modelers in the audience? 3D modelers and animators. That is one of the categories that we have, is game assets for our competition, and game assets includes a animation and modeling category. So for those of you doing 3D art, feel free to ask if you've got anything. If not, I'll quickly hand it over to our hosts, who I'm sure are much more entertaining, or hopefully have been entertaining you throughout the day today. Like I said, I hope you've been enjoying all of the talks today. And as we plan for next year, which we will be having. I know that Daniel Jackson's talked about all the different events and community things that are going on, and mentioned CSGC, and we will be hosting CSGC in April 2022, and it will hopefully be live and in person. But regardless of whether we are in person or not, we're going to continue doing the live streams just to allow more people to participate and be a part of this event. We've got attendees all around the nation and even around the world who have been participating today. One of the questions is, do you make artwork in 3D Studio Max, or just in general? So in 3D Studio Max, obviously you can make stills. You can make your 3D models and do a whole still shot of it. In fact, one of the things that you would do if you were creating a huge animation is that you wouldn't actually render out, let's say, the background environment as part of the animation, it would just take a lot of time because you have to process all those models. So you would model everything in Max for the background, save it out as a still image, and then put that in the background of your next animation. So that's a still image, and then everything in the foreground are the actual models. So you have less to render when you actually get to animating and rendering. Where do you find the best place to obtain game assets? Unity Asset Store, making your own, or some other resources? Depends on how much time you want invested and how unique the item is. It just depends. So, for example, our current game that you guys can go out there and play, Froglet Icelet or Islet, is being produced by our senior course, our game production class. And for that course, the game is about an island full of frogs that you've got to collect, kind of like Pokemon. But for time resources, we found that it was more economical thus to find like palm trees and tiki huts. There were a lot of free assets and an asset pack that we purchased for class in the Unity Asset Store. However, you're going to very rarely find some frogs on the Unity Asset Store, and especially since we were making them kind of unique, again, kind of like Pokemon, we had to have our modelers on the team model the frogs, and they modeled and animated the frogs. They modeled the player character to give the game more uniqueness. So I think it just depends on if you have the resources and time to model your own things. But I would definitely say if it's unique to the game, you want to make it your own, and you're probably not going to find anything that's right otherwise. So great questions, great questions. Obviously, if you're talking about the artwork, I do some artwork when I have sparingly of free time, and I will say if you're into two-dimensional art or just sort of painting, I absolutely love Sketchbook. The app for the iPad, if you're using like the stylus pen, I use that all the time. I do sort of like fake watercolor paintings within the app, and you can actually see some of the artwork and stuff that I do occasionally if I have time on my Twitter and Instagram account, which is Professor Akram, just like my Discord name. So I'm Professor Akram pretty much everywhere out there. And yeah, so great questions, great questions. I am actually going to go ahead and turn it over. Let's see. Is it worth looking at how others create models and see how to evaluate how it is made? Absolutely. So the question is, should you see how other people model models, and if it's helpful in your own modeling process? And it's very helpful. Especially one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of tutorials out there talk about box modeling, which is where you take a cube, and almost like clay modeling in traditional art, you take a cube of clay and you start pressing in on it and you start sculpting your model. So box modeling is very similar in 3D software, and that's kind of the standard when you're making characters and stuff. But one of the methods that a lot of people forget is available in 3D software is spline modeling, and that's where you take outlines or even straight lines, and you manipulate them into different shapes. And sometimes it's really quicker to use spline modeling from box modeling. So for example, if you had to create a house layout, for example, you could create the outlines of all the walls like a floor plan, and then just extrude that up into a 3D model. And it just takes an extrude and a spline. And other methods like lofts, say you wanted to create a screwdriver, for example, you could take a series of spline circles at different shapes and diameters and tell a straight line path to create a loft between those shapes, and it would create the shape of like a screwdriver. There'd be some tweaks to do and stuff like that, but a loft would be really quick instead of having to hand model that, and you get a little bit more accurate in some of those types of objects. So mixing and matching really depends on what you're modeling, but it's a great idea to kind of get a sense of how people start their models, what to look for when modeling, and so forth. So yeah, it is definitely a worth looking at other people's modeling techniques and seeing how others model. So with that said, again, I hope you've been enjoying CSGC. And as always, we're going to give a big round of applause to our sponsors, and I'm going to get our host back on here.